CITV's coverage of the convening of the legislature. And of course, we're going to have a parade today as well. We are live here in Town Square, St. George, for the convening of the 2020 legislature. Joining me this morning, ladies and gentlemen, is my co-host. I'm so delighted to have her back with us again, Heather Whalen. Heather now, of course, is retired, finished up with community and culture, former director of community and cultural affairs. But we've brought her back because she knows things.
Thank you, Tina.
And we love working with you.
It is lovely to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, as we are under the tents here in St. George in the town square, just outside of Town Hall, we are getting ready to start, and a lot of the guests are arriving. Of course, we're practicing social distancing and mask wearing. All the guests, as we will see in just a bit, but guests are slowly arriving now for the start of the convening. So we welcome you to this special occasion of the 400th anniversary of the convening of Bermuda's legislature. And it is our pleasure, Heather and I, to serve as your commentators for today. We'll explain the ceremony that will unfold as you watch of course, on CITV or Facebook. And we are, as I said, practicing social distancing protocols being adhered to. The proceedings will be via social media, government's Facebook page, CITV, or you can go to government's portal, gov.bm. So tell a friend that we are live. You want to watch the pomp and the pageantry of the convening of the legislature for 2020. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. And the town square, as Tina said, is the venue for this year's convening of Parliament. It has been beautifully transformed. You will see how beautifully transformed the square is with the tents, the chairs set such that there's the social distancing. You'll see it we see it on the monitor, so I know you see it as well. They have done an excellent job in recreating the atmosphere that normally is the convening on the cabinet grounds.
Yes, yeah. This convening, of course, is especially significant because it marks the 400th anniversary of the first meeting of Bermuda's General Assembly. That event occurred on August 1st, 1620. Remember that, because we will be doing a test at the end. So Bermuda's first General Assembly, that event occurred August 1st, 1620 in the lovely town of St. George's at St. Peter's Church, right here in St. George's. And that's where the members of the legislature are assembling right now. Thus, the government has chosen, and the Speaker of the House has chosen to commemorate that singularly important date in Bermuda's history by having this year's ceremony take place in the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the town of St. George.
And just to let our listeners and viewers know, because it's the 400th anniversary, the Speaker, along with his anniversary committee, chose as a theme Bermuda Future Matters. There were several plans for activities throughout the year honoring that theme and expanding on it, but then with the pandemic, most things got scaled down. But do you know, they had the first day covers, and the launch of that was on the steps of St. Peter's, so that was lovely. And then there were panels that have been placed outside of the government post office depicting those first day covers. For example, entrance to St. Peter, the inside of the chamber, the mace, the wooden gavel. Several of those are featured on the first day cover stamps.
Yeah. So there has been as Heather said, were you a part of that committee?
I was.
Yeah, good.
So although I'm retired, I found very exciting things.
We're keeping you busy.
Yes, I love that.
Everyone's keep Ms. Whalen busy. But the committee, of course, has done a great job over the year to do events, even though we were, of course, shelter in place and all the pandemic rules and new policies and procedures. Also, not only did you do the first day covers, I love the things, the little videos that they've been doing, introducing people to the role of Parliament
That's
and the
right.
role of the House and the role of the Senate. Very good. I saw MP Lawrence
Lawrence
Scott
Scott, he
is on
chaired
too.
that along with, he had Mackenzie Hoyt-Zool, a young lady, Palacio,
Yeah, Maya Palacio.
Palacio, and another young lady, and they worked on creating those videos. They also did one explaining how Parliament works. It's a really nice
It's very
vignette,
good. It's very
and
good.
it's done well so that a child can understand and an adult can understand.
Yes.
But so those were some of the things that were able to take place despite
Yes.
despite the
So
pandemic and
well
the
done to
shutdown.
the committee, chaired by the Speaker of the
Of the
House.
House,
And well
yes.
done to the committee to get us here today.
He was so excited about
Yes,
that.
absolutely. So go ahead, Emma, tell us more.
Oh, well, thanks, Tina. We
Because-
want to share with you some important aspects of Bermuda's political evolution. And we are going to do that and intertwine it with commentary with regard to what's happening today with this special convening. For example, the constitutional order by which Bermuda is governed sets out the composition of the legislature. Never in the constitutional order does it say Bermuda has a parliament. It sets out the composition of the legislature. It states that the legislature of Bermuda, and I quote, shall consist of Her Majesty, a Senate, and a House of Assembly. The Senate, also referred to as the upper house, well, previously referred to as the upper house, and the House of Assembly, previously referred to as the lower house, are scheduled now and are convening at St. Peter's Church for the start of the convening. And of course, we won't have Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II here. Her representative is the governor, His Excellency John Rankin. And we will tell you more when he arrives, and there will be that pageantry that goes on with that. During this ceremony, you will have a chance to witness history and traditions that are formally interwoven into the Constitution of our land. And because of the significance of this convening, we think it is fitting to provide you with some of the political landmarks. And we will attempt to entwine this, as I said, with our commentary during this, one of the most distinctive events on the legislative calendar. Tina?
Yeah, go ahead. In doing so, we hope that your understanding of the legislature, its history and development, as well as traditions, and this is a time-honored tradition, the convening of the legislature, and traditions and the political growth of Bermuda. It's an amazing 400 years. Bermuda has evolved to that of a self-governing territory with control over most of our internal affairs. We have reached the position primarily as a result of a constitutional order established in 1968. And many of you, we will share with you several significant changes that resulted from the constitutional order of 1968. Today's convening is also significant because it will be the first sitting of Bermuda's legislature body since the general election that took place this year in October. The outcome of that election, of course, as most of us know, resulted in the Progressive Labor Party being returned to power, and the youngest Labor Party, the Progressive Labor Party, being, I should say, the youngest leader, Bermuda's youngest premier, the Honorable E. David Burke, JP, won 30 of the 36 seats for the House of Assembly.
That was indeed a landslide.
It was. It was.
And so I'm sure that the premier was most pleased and excited with that result. So you talk about the right to vote, Tina. This right, and some of us may not realize it, but this right to vote has not always been afforded to all Bermudians who are 18 years of age and older. This democratic right has come as a result of resilience, persistence, and challenge by certain people who refused to accept the status quo.
Absolutely.
Believe it or not, from the 1600s and officially established by legislation in 1789, only males who owned land valued at 24 pounds were eligible to vote. And political candidates had to own land valued at 124 pounds. You know, it's noteworthy that after emancipation, which occurred in Bermuda in 1834, the land requirements were raised significantly, such that only males who owned land worth 60 pounds or more were eligible to vote. And to be a candidate for the various parishes or the various parish constituencies, a male had to own land valued at 240 pounds. So they doubled the requirements.
Yeah.
And
After emancipation.
After emancipation. And these requirements ended up excluding many from voting or from running as a candidate in elections. And this didn't change. This didn't change until the middle of the 20th century. That's amazing and astonishing.
Yeah.
Property-owning women finally won the right to vote in 1944. This was a direct result of the actions and persistence of Bermuda Women's Suffrage Society. That organization was actually started in 1923, but it took them 21 years before they won what they were achieving. So that's an example of persistence that we talked about. And they were trying to raise awareness of the voting disparities. And just as I point out, I should also point out to our audience, our listening audience, that the Bermuda Women's Suffrage Society was formed in 1923, 9 years after Gladys Mizik Morrell first raised the issue of women's voting rights in a public forum. She's one of our national heroes.
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is. And the property requirements had the effect of disenfranchising people. Latina, do you want to share with us about another person who worked hard so that all people got the right to vote?
Absolutely. And it was, of course, in 1960, which it was in the memory of many that still remember. The Committee for Universal Adult Suffrage was formed by Dr. Paulu Karamafego, or then known as Roosevelt Brown, who challenged Bermuda's undemocratic voting system.
He's one of our national heroes as well.
Yes. Bermuda witnessed a political watershed in 1963 when the Parliamentary Election Act allowed every Bermudian who was 25 years or older to have the right to vote. That's just 1963. That's 59 short years ago. Just 1963, yeah. Further political developments occurred in 1966 when voting age was lowered to 21 years and the property vote was withdrawn. That property vote, also dubbed as the plus vote, because males who own property of a certain value had an extra vote. Then, get this, from 66, all the way to 1990, the voting age was finally lowered to 18 years in 1990. So,
and do you know that plus vote meant that if a man, at that time normally a white male, owned property in more than one constituency, he could therefore vote in those. So,
and we're talking only 59 short years ago. That's what I keep thinking, you know. How long it took to evolve.
Exactly. And so that's when we should be grateful to the people like Gladys Morrell, Dr. Paul Luke, Camara Cathego, and others. But there were others who were working behind the scenes.
And some of our national heroes that I know your department worked on years, when you think of
your mother,
Dame Lois Brown Evans, and Dr. E.F. Gordon, and those that worked, Dr. E.T. Richards, Sir E.T. Richards. So it's all all of those that have worked behind the scenes,
Yes.
forefront,
They
I should
were.
say forefront
They
in
were in the
making sure.
forefront. But
So,
so many
Bermuda,
behind the scenes as
yes,
well.
absolutely, absolutely. We think of the progressive group
Yes,
as well.
absolutely.
Bermuda's legislative body is the oldest in the Commonwealth outside the British Isles and dates back to the 1st of August, 1620, when the then governor, Nathaniel Butler, summoned a General Assembly to meet at St. Peter's Church in St. George. And that first meeting was Bermuda's first General Assembly, comprised of Governor Butler and the council, along with 2 male representatives, each from the 8 tribes, now designated parishes, into a colony. And we just see us arriving on the square, many of the family and the spouses, and we also, of course, see Kristen Burt,
Premier Brett's
Premier
wife.
Bert's wife, as well, just arriving. So people are starting to arrive, as I said, and be seated on the square. It's noteworthy during the opening of the first General Assembly, Governor Nathaniel Butler remarked, and this is a quote, "We come not for ourselves only, or any man's in particular, but to serve and regard the public. We are therefore to rid ourselves from all desires of gain. We are to despise all personal interests." That charge that he made then is a charge that is still relevant today.
Indeed it is.
So the purpose of that General Assembly was to discuss local issues, and during that occasion, the meeting that was held August 1st, 1620, 5 acts were discussed, agreed on, and then prepared to be sent to England for the approval of the company.
And it's important to point out that because we are a territory, our bills, or what we want as laws, have to align with the mother country.
Yeah.
And in recent times, there have been some instances when some of the things that we want as laws haven't, or England wanted us to take a particular stand on certain things. Anyway, let's continue sharing. We mentioned earlier that today's convening will take place here, and the square looks lovely. It used to take place, from 1999, it used to take place on Cabinet grounds, and that, before taking place on Cabinet grounds, it used to take place in the Senate. Well, when the PLP government won the general election in 1998, Dame Jennifer Smith was the premier and leader of the government. And it was under her leadership that the convening of Parliament switched from being held in Senate grounds and was then held under beautiful tents on the Cabinet lawn. And that was a welcome change, because the Senate chambers was far, far too small, and the proceedings carried on the Cabinet grounds. This new venue of St. George's King Square has therefore required that we make some adjustments. And as well, because of COVID, we've had to make other adjustments as well. Hence, that's why the senators, and the members of the House of Assembly are now gathering at St. Peter's Church. The members of the House are gathering in St. Peter's Church, while the senators are gathering in the church hall. And you will see where the members of the House of Assembly are there now gathered, and what's going on in St. Peter's Church with the Speaker of the House, the Clerk to the Legislature, Mrs. Shernette Wolf, and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course they're gathering, as we can see right there. I do believe the members, right there, the members are being sworn in as members of Parliament, and they are going one by one for their swearing in. The members of Parliament, as Heather said, are in St. Peter's Church. The senators are meeting in the hall. The procession is part of the pageantry. They will They will process from down from St. Peter's Church, and the pageantry, of course, of the procession has become a hallmark of the convening because it will be treated to music played by the Royal Bermuda Regiment Drum Corps and Band. And of course, our cameras will be delighted to show you that as they process from the senators. The senators will be joined by His Worship, the Mayor of St. George's, Mr. George Dowling III. Now, I said Town of St. George, Mayor of St. George, Mr. George.
Mr. George.
Mr. George Dowling, His Worship, Mr. George Dowling III. Now, the mayor will come down. He'll greet the governor when the governor arrives. He'll welcome His Excellency to the town of St. George. Other dignitaries include members of the Corporation of Hamilton, the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Mr. Stephen Corbishley, the commanding officer of the Royal Bermuda Regiment, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin L. Beasley. And just a side note, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Beasley, he's the youngest person ever to serve in that capacity.
Yes, I was told that.
Yeah. Now, although this venue has changed and the requisite adjustments made, the usual traditional pomp and ceremony that has become customary for this occasion will still be prominent. For example, all the dignitaries will stand on arrival of His Excellency the Governor. The national anthem will be played. The band of the Royal Bermuda Regiment, upon his revival, His Excellency will be met in the square by the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Beasley, and by, I do believe now, President-elect of the Senate. I do believe she may have been elected, if someone can let me know that. Senator Mrs. Joan Dillis Wright. The commanding officer will escort His Excellency to the center of the guard and of honor, where His Excellency will receive a royal salute. So normally that happens on Front Street, but I'm sure it'll be right over here to the side of Town Square, and you can see people getting ready for the parade and getting in position. Go ahead.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, the band, the Guard of Honor will be right over there in front of White Horse Tavern.
Right.
Because of the pandemic and the fact that we've had to follow protocols, COVID protocols, the governor, His Excellency, the governor, will not inspect the Guard of Honor on this occasion. Instead, he will receive the salute from the Guard of Honor, and then he will be escorted to the mayor's parlor. He will be escorted to the mayor's parlor by Lieutenant Colonel Beasley, and the mayor will be in the parlor ready to greet and welcome the governor to the town of St. George. Also, it should be noted that the Royal Bermuda Regiment is being afforded freedom of the city. This is an act that is bestowed on an individual or an organization that has contributed much to the town. Once His Excellency has been greeted by the worshipful mayor, Mr. George Dowling III, he will then dispatch Black Rod to summon the members of the House of Assembly to enter the square for the convening of Parliament. Specifically, His Excellency will say to Black Rod, and I quote, "Gentlemen usher of the Black Rod, I command you to inform the Speaker of the House of Assembly that I request the presence of His Honorable House forthwith."
No, I want to put this down.
The role of Black Rod is carried out by a senior police officer. Today, Assistant Commissioner Martin Weeks will have the honor of assuming the duties of Black Rod. His Excellency will be escorted onto the platform by the aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Alexander Gibbs. And I should say, Assistant Commissioner Weeks has performed this duty of Black Rod on several occasions before. So he's quite familiar with his role and what he has to do. As a matter of fact, we see him right here under the tent and getting ready to carry out his duties in a few minutes.
All right. So as you were saying, Heather, as we're trying to stay in time because they'll be marching on at about in about another 20 minutes. They'll be marching on, and I know everyone. As you know, that those of you that are listening, and I know you know, remember I tell you it'll be a test at the end of this now. Our House of Assembly is actually the lower house or of our legislature. Members are appointed to the Senate or the upper house. His Excellency the Governor, John Rankin, CMG, will read the speech from the throne. The speech is prepared by government and outlines the initiatives for the coming year. The Premier let us know at one of his press conferences that it's going to be relatively short this year. But as we mentioned earlier, Bermuda's political development is largely attributed to the constitutional order that was introduced in 1968. The evolution of our franchise is built on the result of persons who questioned and challenged the status quo and sought to make Bermuda a more just and inclusive society. To provide our audiences with some context of the significance, it is the constitutional order of 1968 set the whole framework on which we still operate to today.
Absolutely, it does.
These significant milestones, we should be reminded and informed, and I know you're going to share some of that. The framework of government was introduced under the Summers Isle regime in 1620 and remained virtually unchanged till 1968. That's amazing.
That's amazing.
That's
It's
amazing.
incredible.
The middle of the 20th century, that's right, from 1620 to 1968, there you go. Under that old framework and system of government, the governor and his council met regularly, but not the General Assembly. It's fascinating history when you really get a chance to sit down and read about it. But go ahead, talk about that constitutional conference.
Okay. It took place in 1966, and the participants included representatives from the Progressive Labor Party. That party had just started or been formally established in 1963, and it was our first political party. There were representatives from the then United Bermuda Party that was established in 1964, and there were independents. The conference produced a new constitutional order that we've been referencing for Bermuda, and that constitutional order came into effect June 8, 1968. Under the new constitution, the legislature was convened on June 14th. Some have referred to the Constitution as the internal self-government form because it gave responsibility for domestic matters such as education, finance, health, transportation, public works, immigration. It gave those responsibilities to the local government, whilst the governor retains control of external affairs, defense, internal security, and police. And as a result of the Constitutional Conference, there was another one held at the Warwick Camp in 1979. The designations changed.
Right.
The Executive Council and Legislative Council changed to Cabinet and Senate, respectively. The Constitutional Conference took place and brought about other changes. It provided that elected members of the legislature were now referred to as members of Parliament. Previously, they were called members of the colonial parliament. The members in charge became ministers, and the executive council became the cabinet. So you see the continuation of the evolution and development of the legislature.
And that was 1979.
And that was 1979. It is worth noting that a change in government did not take place after 1968 until the momentous general election of 1998, when, as I've said before, the opposition Progressive Labor Party came to power under Dame Jennifer Smith. As a direct result of the 1998 general election, Bermuda also witnessed the first politically appointed Attorney General, that of the late Honorable Dame Lois Brown Evans.
Yes.
Tina, do you know her?
I certainly do.
I
And I remember her today. This was always a special occasion for her. Always a big event, the convening of the legislature.
Indeed.
Yes, and I also remember her going off to the help write the constitutional, the constitutional order in 1968.
Yes.
I was a little girl. I missed her, but she went. She had to go, and she went off with the other representatives. I think Sir A.T. Richards, and I don't want to do that because I'll forget names, and went off to write Bermuda's Constitution. That remains today. She was an awesome woman.
She was an awesome woman and brought about such important changes in Bermuda, and she fought for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in July 2003, following changes to Bermuda's Constitution, general election took place under the revised format of 36 single-seat constituency. That was a big one, too, and that was July 2003. By custom now, all proceedings of either house are open to the public, and since 1991, debates in the House of Assembly and the Senate are broadcast over the radio. So hopefully soon we'll get to see live TV.
Yes, yes.
Now, we will, in a few moments, when the governor arrives, Black Rod will be dispatched to go to St. Peter's Church, knock on the door, and let them know that His Excellency the Governor is waiting for them on the square.
And they must come forthwith.
Yes. Black Rod represents a symbol of authority or head of state. And the House of Lords official, known as Black Rod, is sent to summon the Commons. The doors to the Commons chamber are shut in his face, a practice dating back to Civil War, symbolizing the Commons' independence from the monarchy. Black Rod strikes the door 3 times before it's open. Members of the House of Commons then follow Black Rod and the Common Speaker to the Lord's Chamber, standing at opposite ends of the throne, known as the bar of the House, to listen to the speech. So that will be happening pretty soon.
2 of our justices just arrived.
I do believe I saw Chief Justice Narendra Hargan
And Chief Justice
and
Justice Shade Subair is Williams. Yes. So our viewing audience may have recognized them. They certainly would have seen them gowned in their robes and beautiful red robes and the white lace. And some of them may have been wondering, now, who's that coming?
Right. And so that was Chief Justice Narendra Hargan and Justice
Shade Subair.
You know, the Royal Bermuda Regiment Band today, when they get ready to march on the square. I believe they met at Penno's Wharf, and they're assembling there, and they will march on the square. The Royal Bermuda Regiment Band is under the command of the director, Major Dwight Robinson. So Major Robinson will be always a pleasure to work with Major Robinson, and we're very delighted that the band is back this year.
Absolutely.
Because previous years they've been either abroad or
doing some training camp
or unable to perform the function, and so we're delighted to be treated by the Royal Bermuda Regiment Band.
And they add to the pageantry.
Yes.
And of course the music is very interesting and adds to the pomp and ceremony of the occasion. So certainly we welcome them and pleased to have them here.
Black
we were
Rod.
talking. Black Rod, has he been?
I saw him moving about, but he will be back in position. Go ahead.
Okay. Remember we were talking about some of the people who were persistent and worked hard to help bring about the changes in our status quo. Sadly, one lady who worked behind the scenes, she worked hard with Dr. Gordon and the Bermuda Workers Association and the Bermuda, the BIU. She recently passed. Mrs. Ann Pinder. I don't know if people knew of Mrs. Pinder and the work that she did, but she was one of those staunch, hardworking women. And as a woman working back then in the 40s and 50s, that took courage.
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe it wouldn't have been the Bermuda Industrial Union at that time.
Well, first she
she
worked
was
for the
a
Bermuda Workers Association,
association. There
which
you
gave
go.
birth to the Bermuda Industrial Union.
And then she also ran for the Progressive Labor Party.
She did.
And one of the things Dame Jennifer always mentions is that on one occasion, actually was reported in the World Gazette, on one occasion she went down to a conference. I do believe it might have been Bahamas, somewhere in the islands. And as a result of what she went down and got, she helped bring back, pass it on to the Progressive Labor Party, and it helped form and shape the Progressive Labor Parties.
Fantastic.
Right.
So her contributions are
Right.
immeasurable, and sadly, I don't know that many of us know about her
I
and
don't.
what she has done.
So it's definitely a name that we need to bring forward again.
Absolutely.
And talk about her role. When we talk about those unsung heroes,
yes.
those people that were behind the scenes. And I always, I'm challenged not to call names because you'll miss names. But you think of those in the progressive group and all of
Isola
those.
Harvey and her husband,
Don't
Dr. Maxwell.
See, you're gonna
Maxwell.
start. You're gonna start.
I think you're right. I think I should stop.
We'll forget all the people that in the early 50s that went to before even Paulu. I think of my pastor's dad.
Mr. Tweed,
yes,
Kingsley Tweed, yes.
And I think of all those that were there before that we don't get to recognize sometimes. So one of the things I want you to know that Black Rod is normally a role that is being executed by the police, and today it's being executed by the Assistant Commissioner of Police, Martin Weeks, who has performed his duties on
many occasions.
Many occasions.
And speaking of Black Rod and that tradition, there's another tradition, and I read it in the article that John Barrett wrote in Wednesday's paper. There's this tradition that dates back centuries, and John Barrett, former MP, put it in the paper, and he says that the monarch, the queen, or her representative, will not set foot in the people's representative assemblies unless possibly by special invitation. That's why the tradition has been established for so long that the throne speech is read by the governor, who's the Queen's representative, and is read anywhere else except in the assemblies. And that's why it's read in the cabinet grounds or here or in the Senate. And that was a tradition that he made mention of. I didn't know about that.
Didn't realize it either.
No.
So, of course, today, as we said, is following on the heels of the October general election. And this convening of Parliament will be a first for newly elected members of Parliament and appointed senators, newly elected PLP MPs, Minister the Honorable Kathy Simmons, MP Vance Campbell, MP Crystal Caesar, MP Anthony Richardson, MP Iantha Simmons Wade, MP Jashay Adams, and MP Jason Wade. Newly elected OBA MPs, MP Jerry and Richardson, and newly appointed PLP senators, as we learned yesterday, Ernest Peets has been appointed as the Senate leader for the PLP, for the government, I should say. Newly appointed PLP senators are Owen Darrell, Curtis Richardson, Ariana Hudson, Lindsey Simmons.
And you know,
I can hear
the drum of the band. Yeah. Just to let our listening and viewing audience know, they may know that there are some family connections as well. For example, there have been times, right now, we have a father and son that are sitting in the House of Assembly. Look at our band. Tina, maybe we should pause and let everyone enjoy the Royal Bermuda Regiment Band under the direction of Major Dwight Robinson. They look so smart.
Very good. And we see Black Rod standing at the town hall, at the entrance to the town hall.
Yes, Black Rod is
Yeah.
standing at the entrance to the town hall.
He's preparing for the governor's arrival.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
The regiment, it's on the square now, so the ceremony proper
Yeah.
is underway.
And the Guard of Honor is in place as well. Thank you. Yes. We get ready for it. Go ahead.
Yes. 2 members of the House of Assembly will be, we should have the arrival of the members of the corporation.
I've seen some members
I've seen
arrive.
some. Cindy Swan has come in and a few others. The Commissioner of Police, I haven't seen him arrive yet, Mr. Corbishley, but he's one of the dignitaries who will be arriving shortly.
So standing in place right outside of town square, of town hall, so we're looking at right now.
Okay.
Is Black Rod.
Black Rod.
And I do believe that's, yes, His Worship for
Mayor.
Mayor.
Yes.
George Dowling.
George Dowling, yes.
So they will wait, of course, for the arrival of His Excellency, and His Excellency, of course, will dispatch Black Rod. And on the southern corner, meanwhile,
Yes.
this is good and going. Yeah.
Yes, on the southern stairway of St. Peter's Church, a member of the governor's staff is there waiting, and then will issue directions.
And I do believe today they'll issue directions, and I think they'll be met by a member of the opposition, as well as a member of the governor's staff will be met by a member of the opposition and a member of the government. And I do believe this year it is Crystal Caesar, MP Crystal Caesar, and MP Jerry Richardson.
Okay.
They'll meet the governor's staff, they'll get the notice,
Right.
and then Black Rod will be dispatched.
Yes.
So that's all going on while, of course, you see the band and the regiment and the honor guard waiting at attention for the arrival of His Excellency.
And because it's such beautiful weather, the governor should be arriving in his horse-drawn landau. That adds to the pomp and the pageantry, and is spectacular. And of course, the governor will have on his feathered plumed hat, and he will have on his very formal attire as well.
I didn't know. Does he still do that for a tradition? That's a good one. We should have found that one out. Not sure if they still put on the ceremonial dress.
He did the last time in 2018. Now, I don't know if he'll do it this time, but the weather is lovely.
And this will be his...
And this will be his last convening, because he's being reassigned, is it to the British Virgin Islands?
I can't remember. Sorry. But I do know he is being reassigned.
And this is the last convening of Parliament over which he will be presiding. So it's a special occasion for him as well.
Yeah. And we see Sir John Swan arriving.
He's another national hero. He's the only living national hero
That's right.
that we have.
And I also saw Dame Jennifer Smith. She's already seated.
She's already seated? I missed her.
And I also saw the former Speaker of the House, Randolph Horton.
Yes, I did see
Mr.
Horton arrive, indeed.
And of course, some of the newer members of the House, I think we were saying that some of them have such long history in their families and in their own personal family connections and associations that we thought may be of the interest as you're listening is we wish to share that there have been aunts, there have been uncles and nephews who've sat in the House of Assembly at the same time or followed each one. There have been cousins who have either sat on in the House at the same time.
They've been brothers. For example, the Speaker and his brother, Terry, sat in the House at the same time.
Lister, There was a father and daughter who sat in the House of Assembly at the same time as well.
That's right. That was Mr. Eugene Cox and his daughter, the former
Yes,
Premier Paula
yes,
Cox.
yes.
Yes.
And of course, currently there's a father and a son in the House of
Mm-hmm.
Assembly, and those family dynamics that politics runs in the blood.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And you know, this year we had a third political party that entered the race. And some people may think that was the first time, but we've had third political parties
Right.
entering general elections previously. Some people may recall that there was the Bermuda Democratic Party, and that was back in the 1960s. Some members left the PLP and they formed the Bermuda Democratic Party. In the 1980s, a PLP member left and formed the National Liberal Party. And in the 1990s, UBP members left and joined the PLP. And then in the early 2000s, some UBP members left and formed the Bermuda Democratic Alliance. So third parties is not new.
No, nor independence as well.
Or independence as well.
Yeah, it's not new to us and the who work under and rule under the Westminster system.
right.
But there's also been a number of firsts, and I do want to remember Mr. Ernest Decudo. Yes.
Yes.
He was the first speaker of Portuguese descent, former Speaker of the House, the late Mr. Ernest Decudo. There was Hilda Aiken and Edna Watson,
Yeah.
who were the first women to win seats in the House of Assembly. This was in 1948, so it would have been 4 years after the women had the right to vote in a general election. And then the gentle warrior, the committed lady, Gloria McPhee, was the first woman to be appointed to cabinet position as a minister under the United Bermuda Party. There have been two outstanding women who have served in the position of Premier, government leader. Three. Yeah, I'm sorry. Three. That, of course, is the Honorable Dame Pamela Gordon for the United Bermuda Party, the Honorable Dame Jennifer Smith for the Progressive Labor Party, and the Honorable Paula Cox for the Progressive Labor Party.
Three.
Yeah. And, of course, now, following the procedures, our commentary, of course, will stop once the governor arrives, and we won't be commentating any further, and the prayers will be led today.
The prayers will be offered by Bishop Nicholas Dill.
Right, Bishop Nicholas Dill will do the prayers. So we will stop commentating, but we want to let you know we'll be back right after the ceremony finishes. We'll come back with a few words for you as well. Once the governor has finished reading the speech from the throne, will be available. It will be available online on the government portal, gov.bm. You will be able to go online and read a copy of the throne speech in its entirety. Following the events on the square and the reading of the speech from the throne, the members of Parliament, members of Senate will go back to St. Peter's Church. And we are delighted because we have cameras in there today. So CITV will be able to show you the proceedings.
Yes.
Something special. Yeah.
Something special. This hasn't happened before. There will be a 20-minute pause, but then the Youth Parliament will be provided with an opportunity to chat and ask questions of the Premier. So that should be exciting.
Yeah, and it's two dynamic young youth parliamentarians that will be, of course, they'll be part of the procession as well. But they will be coming down. So the cameras have been allowed, CITV has been allowed to remain inside of the St. Peter's. So we want you to stay with us.
Yes.
You'll see milling about and so forth.
Yes.
But we'll be right back for that. So we want you to stay and hear the proceedings. Hear the young people ask the Premier, asking the Premier questions. Special Premier. It looks like, I can see from the corner, that it looks like the senators are going to be arriving very shortly. Or the members of Parliament are getting ready.
You can see on the monitor, we see them coming past now.
So, because they will be arriving very quickly onto the square, so things are moving.
And just so people know, the opposition will give their reply next week.
All right, so we have the members of the senators that are arriving. They will arrive, of course, it looks like she is not Senator President-elect, she is President, Senate President Joan Dillis Wright, JP, uh, the Deputy Clerk to the Legislature, Mr. Clark Sumner, is walking with them, Senator Michelle Simmons, and newly appointed Senator R. John White.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
And right behind them, go ahead, Tina.
Our government senators, newly appointed government senators and government leader in the Senate, Senator Ernest Peets, followed by Senator Owen Darrell, Senator Lindsey Simmons, and Senator Ariana Hudson, as well as Senator Curtis Richardson. So they will be going in to take their seats. As I said, you're looking at Deputy Clerk to the Legislature, Clark
Sumner.
And Mrs. Michelle Simmons, Senator Michelle Simmons, and newly standing right behind her is newly elected Senator R. John Wright.
Right. Our opposition senators, Senator Ben Smith. Well, let's wait. Let me pause while the senators each are seated.
The Senate President, newly elected President of the Senate, Senator Joan Dillis Wright, will take up her position at Town Hall along with his worship, Mayor Darling, and Black Rod as they continue to wait the arrival
of His Excellency. Yes.
So they'll take up their position and retire for a bit until the members of Parliament come down as well.
And of course, they are maintaining their social distancing, and that will explain why the seating is taking a little longer.
Yeah.
Here we have the government leader of the Senate, Ernest Peets. He's approaching now. He just went in, followed by Senator Owen Darrell, Government Senator Owen Darrell. Senator Darrell is followed by Senator Ariana Hudson.
And Ariana is the granddaughter
of Arthur Hudson. Yeah. That's right. More family dynamics and family connections.
And Senator Curtis Richardson.
Yeah.
This will be going in.
Senator Richardson's followed by Senator Lindsey Simmons.
Yes.
Oh, I'm very proud of her.
Senator Ben Smith for the opposition is the opposition leader in the Senate, Shadow Minister of Education, National Security, the Cabinet Office, Youth, Sports, and Community Affairs. Now, as you can see, the governor is about to arrive.
Yes, the governor's about to arrive.
Senator Robin Tucker just went through, and now Senator Marcus Jones.
He's the Shadow Minister for Finance, Tourism, Public Works, and Legal Affairs. Yep. Here we have the governor arriving in, as you can see on the monitor, he's coming down the street. He's in the landau, the horse-drawn carriage.
There's Commander Beasley.
Commander Beasley just came onto the square.
Will be in place to meet His Excellency.
And of course, there's the motorcade that is preceding the governor. The governor's in the
Great shot.
Yeah, isn't that?
Well done.
Ah,
I've got to give
very impressive.
CITV team
Ah,
set up
yes.
great camera angles. We've had some great
Great
cameras.
camera angles. Yes, we have. Excellent. And so I'm sure our viewing audience is really appreciative of the hard work that CITV is doing so that they can see it all, just as we're seeing it. So kudos to CITV. This is Janelle and her team and all others who are working with CITV.
Yeah, I was trying to find the aide de camp's name.
His name is Lieutenant Alexander Gibbs.
So Lieutenant Alexander Gibbs was, of course, just came from the Landau. Delighted everyone. And on the arrival of the governor on the square.
The audience is standing.
Yes.
The governor is now taking this. His Excellency, of course, will arrive now, and he will be met.
The Speaker of the House of Assembly to request the presence of His Honourable House forthwith. So. President, Mr. Mayor, good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
Yeah, I got a married, right?
Is being dispatched to go to the House of Assembly, which will be in St. Peter's Church, and that is, of course, Black Rod Assistant Commissioner Martin Weeks acting as Black Rod. He will head up, and His Excellency, of course, commanded him, saying, "Gentleman usher of the Black Rod, I command you to inform the Speaker of the House of Assembly that I request the presence of His Honorable House forthwith." There you go. So he will be, of course, knocking on the doors of St. Peter's Church, asking for an introduction, being allowed in to come and deliver the
message.
message from the governor.
Then we will see the procession of the elected members of the House of Assembly coming down the steps of St. Peter's Church into the square.
So he was met, the governor, of course, Governor Rankin has retired to the
Mayor's parlor.
mayor's parlor. He will remain there for, until the members of the House of Assembly have arrived, and then the aide-de-camp will take him, they will alight the throne.
The governor was met at the mayor's parlor by the mayor, as well as by the president of the Senate, Joan Dillis Wright.
Yeah.
And of course, the mayor of St. George's is Mr. George Dowling III. He will remain with the governor in the mayor's parlor until the governor alights the throne. So we are now having a picture of the inside of St. Peter's Church Sanctuary, where Black Rod must have knocked on the door.
Yes. The sergeant at arms.
Sergeant Major Allen just opened and shut the door.
Let me see. As we said, this is all we spoke about earlier.
Please bring him forward to the bar of the house.
Sergeant Major Allen has just been instructed to open the door.
Quickly, please. Don't break up the furniture. Don't break up the furniture. It's old furniture now.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded by His Excellency the Governor, on the occasion of this 400th anniversary of the convening of the Legislature,
Delivering the message.
to request the attendance of your Honourable House on the town square of the town of St. George forthwith.
Thank you. Yeah, I have no. Yeah. Members, we can now line up in our
He's
formation.
delivered the message. Black Rod will await. The members of the parliament are now assembling in their positions to start the procession. And of course, the procession is just part of the pageantry that has been just a hallmark of the convening of the legislature, the annual convening of the legislature. It's, normally we see them walking down the steps of
Coming behind the cabinet building.
yes, and
Yeah.
heading down. And as I mentioned before, a lot of our commentary will stop at this point, and allow, of course, for the proceedings to take place. And as you can see, it will move fairly quickly as the members of parliament are now taking their position. Now, all being in order and there being no constitutional changes or anything, everything will changes. There will be, of course, the procession of the Speaker of the House, as well as the members of the government and the opposition.
And the speaker will also be accompanied by Mrs. Shernette Wolf, who is the clerk of the legislature, the sergeant at arms proceeding then.
And as we said, this has just been a fun, phenomenal, awesome occasion to be 400 years later being able to celebrate Bermuda's legislative body, the oldest in the Commonwealth outside of the British Isles, and it dates back to the 1st of August, 1620, right here at St. Peter's Church. So this is, as this is a fitting time to say
It is.
auspicious occasion.
Occasion. Indeed, it is an auspicious
And
occasion.
as we've told you, we've moved from, we've given you lots of historical landmarks along the way. We hope that you've enjoyed the commentary. We remind you, we'll come back briefly at the end of the ceremony. We'll give you few more things, and then we'll follow by the cameras of CITV have been allowed into St. Peter's Church. So you'll be able to see when they go back and resume business in the House. And young youth parliamentarians will be asking questions of the Premier. So I think that might be a first.
I think that is
Yeah,
a
I think
first.
so.
Yes.
But as you see, they're getting ready to walk onto the square and let us get all our names together. So
Sergeant at Arms.
some steep steps.
Those are Sergeant Major Arnold Allen, EN. He is.
And
He's coming right behind Black Rod. So he's leading the procession.
Now, I have to say this. It's not a fashion show, and I'm not trying to make it a fashion show.
Of course not.
But I have to say, the ladies always represent.
They
The
do.
women represent.
They do.
The women members of the Senate, members of Parliament, and
even those in our audience.
yeah. And as I said, my mother loved this occasion, and she always had either her hat, her gloves, her dress. And you don't get many occasions.
You do.
And I always say, people worked hard to get here.
They sure did.
To be members
They
of
sure
Parliament.
did. And sacrifice that
Yes.
you alluded to
Yes,
earlier.
lots of sacrifice.
Lots of
So
sacrifices
I
on the part of the
recognize,
family.
don't let me recognize it is not a fashion show.
It is.
But I am delighted to look at the
Oh, I enjoy it. And we have been blessed with such gorgeous weather today.
Yeah.
Black Rod is leading the procession into the square.
His Excellency has
His Excellency is on the pavilion,
waiting.
standing, awaiting our arrival. Sergeant Major Allen is proceeding.
He's bearing the mace.
He is bearing the mace.
Clerk to the Legislature, Mrs. Shernette Wolf, and followed by the Speaker of the House, Mr. Dennis.
Mr. Dennis Lister.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, good to see you. Good morning, Premier.
And we are delighted that Mr. Speaker has worked so hard, as we said, along with his committee, to pull off the events, even given the fact that, of course, the shelter in place, the pandemic, and there's the opposition leader and the speaker in front, the Premier of Bermuda, the Honorable E. David Burt, JP, opposition leader, the Honorable Cole Simons, JP.
And behind them is the Deputy Speaker of the House, the Honorable Derek Burgess, JP MP.
And as we said, social distancing is really being practiced. So they're being met by the protocol officers who are making sure that there's some distance between as they headed to their seats.
They all have their masks on. They're sanitizing their hands
Yeah.
prior to entering. The Speaker has just greeted the Governor officially. The Premier has entered the tent. And momentarily we will see the Premier greet the Governor. And he has just done so.
And the Honorable, of course, Honorable Cole Simons will be going next on the carpet. Cole Simons, JPMP, been a member of Parliament. I meant to write that down since class. I couldn't remember. But many years, served many years. He said, I think he said six
elections.
6 elections.
Yeah.
The Honorable Derek V. Burgess is the Deputy Speaker. Government Whip is Mr. Scott A. Simmons, JP, MP.
And standing just behind Mr. Scott Simmons is the Honorable Walter H. Raban, JP, MP. He is the Deputy Premier and Minister of Home Affairs.
You're seeing on the screen right now, you missed the Honorable Walter Raban, right? The Honorable Curtis Dickinson, he is the Minister of Finance, JPMP. The Honorable Kathy Lynn Simmons, JPMP. She's the Attorney General, Minister of Legal Affairs. The Honorable Wayne Furbett, Minister for the Office of the Cabinet. The Honorable Wayne L. Furbett, JPMP. The Honorable Kim N. Wilson, JPMP, Minister of Health.
And she's played such a pivotal role.
She has
as Bermuda
played
has.
a pivotal role as we've managed our way through, or continue to manage our way. Lieutenant Colonel, the Honorable David A. Birch, OBE, ED, JPMP, Minister of Public Works. The Honorable
Diallo Rabin, Minister of Education.
Bishop, yeah.
The Honorable Jason
P.
Hayward, Minister of Labor. The Honorable Renee Ming, Minister of National Security.
The Honorable Tanae Furbett, Minister of Social Development and Seniors. And Lawrence Scott, the Honorable Lawrence Scott, Minister of Transport. And here we have the two youth parliamentarians, the youth Mackenzie Cole Tuckett, Youth Deputy Premier, and Youth Speaker Nazai Douglas. Wonderful. Government members of Parliament, the Honorable Zane J.S. De Silva, JPMP, the Honorable Levita Fogo, JPMP, and the Honorable Wayne Keynes, JPMP. That's who you see on your screen right now.
And Mr. Keynes is followed by Mr. Jamal Simmons, JPMP, Mr. Hubert K. Kim Swan, JPMP. He's followed by the Honorable Michael Weeks, JPMP, Mr. Neville Tyrrell, JPMP, Mr. Christopher Famous, JPMP, and Mr. Dennis Lister III, JPMP.
And Mrs. Ianthea G. Simmons Wade, JPMP. Good morning.
Good morning.
Of course. And Mrs. Ms. Crystal C. Caesar, JPMP. And Mr. Vance Campbell, JPMP. Mr. Jason Wade, R. Wade, JPMP. Mr. Jashay Adams, JPMP.
And Mr. Anthony Richardson, JPMP.
And you can see they can hear us a little bit.
Yes.
And is that Mr. That's Mr.
Yes.
Jarian Richardson.
And he's followed by the Honorable Michael Weeks. Michael Dunkley, pardon me, forgive me. Shadow Minister for National Security and Health and Seniors. He is followed by Mrs. Susan Jackson. And Mrs. Jackson's followed by the Honorable Craig L. Cannonier, Shadow Minister of Works and Engineering and Tourism and former Premier.
And Mr. Scott Pierman, JPMP, Shadow Minister of Legal Affairs and Transport. And that will end our commentary for now. We'll have the prayers by Bishop Nicholas Dill and the reading of the throne.
Some words from Psalm 24. The earth is the Lord's, and all its fullness, the world and all those who dwell therein. Please join me in praying. O Lord our God, King of kings and Judge eternal, as we come before you on this historic day, marking the 400th year of continual government in these islands. And as the new parliamentary session begins, we pause firstly to acknowledge your sovereignty and to thank you for your goodness and mercy in providing for us the beautiful land and for the diversity and giftedness of the people who make up our island home. We praise you for all promoting peace and justice to create and preserve that which is right and true. In this last year, we thank you for guiding our leaders with wisdom in the handling of the COVID pandemic, in seeking to bring help to those who have struggled as a result from economic and emotional privation. Thank you for bringing us through a peaceful election and for the opportunity this brings to build for a secure future. However, in a spirit of humility, we also recognize times of division and misunderstanding, violence and injustice, and indifference that has arisen from time to time. We confess that we have not always loved our neighbor as ourselves. And as we lay our mistakes and shortcomings at your feet, we thank you for the forgiveness that you offer, and we pray for the healing and reconciliation of all. And now we pray for today and for the year that lies ahead. As your word commands, so we ask that our leaders will be filled with godly wisdom, the desire and ability to make right judgments, that the resources at their disposal would bring out the best to undo the burdens that so many experience, that promote growth and education, prosperity for the poor, jobs for the jobless, homes for the homeless, a sense of pride in our community, for welfare, mutual understanding, peace, and unity of all. May this island be a place where all are made to feel welcome, resident and visitor alike, a place where art and commerce, learning and unity in our community would be fostered, where families are equipped to raise their children and see their hopes and dreams realized for the following generations, where our precious environment is preserved and protected, where your ways are revered and followed. And because we recognize how hard it is to govern, please protect our leaders. Enable them to communicate well, to be diligent and trustworthy. Surround them with good counselors and careful civil servants, that there may be a sense of mutual respect and fairness, the ability to listen and understand. May we all recognize that we hold whatever position we may have at your behest, and will one day have to give an account that to whom much is given, much is also expected. So we lift up to you our outgoing Governor John Rankin. We pray for the incoming Governor-designate, Ms. Rena Laugi. We pray for our Premier, David Burt, and his cabinet, for the new leader of the opposition, Mr. Cole Simons, for the Speaker and newly elected members of the House of Assembly, for the President and newly appointed senators. We pray for their families, for the pressures upon their home and business lives, for the exhaustion and anxiety that high position can so often bring. Grant to each times of rest and refreshing, clarity of thought and expression, courage and humility in their actions, policies that establish just laws, equitable wealth distribution, fair, open, and accountable practices. And may your mercy rest upon our land and the people that live here, that we may all shine as a light to the nations and show forth your goodness to the world through him who can do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. And may the blessing of God Almighty, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be upon us all, now and always. Amen.
Honourable members of the Senate, have you elected your President?
Your Excellency, I am honoured to inform Your Excellency that I have been elected to that position, and I now submit myself with all humility to Your Excellency's approval.
Madam President, I most heartily approve of your election.
Your Excellency, I thank you for your gracious approbation.
Members of the Honourable House of Assembly, have you elected your Speaker?
Your Excellency, the members of the House of Assembly have elected me as Speaker. I am honored, Your Excellency, I am honored to inform Your Excellency that I have been elected to that position. I have accepted the appointment and now submit myself all to Your Excellency's approval.
Mr. Speaker, I most heartily approve of your election.
Your Excellency, I thank you for your gracious approval. I must now, in the name of, on behalf of Her Majesty, in order that they may be enabled fully to discharge their duties and claim their accent rights and privileges, particularly freedom of speech in their debate, that they may have full access to Your Excellency and that your proceedings may receive the most favourable interpretation.
Mr. Speaker and members of the Honourable House of Assembly, in Her Majesty's name, I do assure to Her Majesty's faithful Commons of the Bermudas the full enjoyment of their ancient rights and privileges, and that they may depend upon a favourable interpretation of their proceedings.
Your Excellency, on behalf of Her Majesty's faithful Commons of Bermuda, I thank you for those assurances.
Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the Legislature convenes today within earshot of the venue where, 400 years ago, an assembly, composed only of white men, was summoned to meet by the then Governor Nathaniel Butler. History records that when they came together to discuss local issues, administer justice and review legislation. To the representatives of Bermuda's then 8 tribes, Nathaniel Butler said, "We come not for ourselves only, or any man's in particular, but to serve and regard the public." From that initial admonition, voiced when even the Pilgrims had not yet set off from Plymouth, England, for the American colonies, Bermuda's legislature has endured. In these 4 centuries, the walls of those chambers in which the legislature has met could speak of debates on slavery, universal adult suffrage, the end of capital punishment, human rights, and all manner of laws meant to serve and regard the public. Today, black and white, women and men represent a people whose vote is of equal value across an island that has surpassed the likely dreams of those who met in that first assembly, only 11 years after the sea venture happened upon this uninhabited North Atlantic paradise. More than ever, the yoke of representative service weighs heavily on those who have taken it up. 400 years later, the Commonwealth's oldest representative body outside the United Kingdom's Parliament will be summoned again to deliberate and act in unprecedented ways in these unprecedented times to meet equally unprecedented challenges. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the unequal beginnings of the different races in Bermuda have culminated in a history that is in degrees untold or not agreed. The ongoing Commission of Inquiry into historic land losses is one such exercise in achieving a correct telling and agreed account of our history. Black people in particular have often been deprived of a history told through their experiences. The importance of this to the development of later generations cannot be underestimated. The Guyanese scholar and social justice champion, Dr. Walter Rodney, spoke of what he termed a series of responsibilities of black people, the most important of which is to define our own situation. An unresolved history is a divider that impacts our cultural identity. Dr. Rodney also observed, a culture is a total way of life. It embraces what people ate and what they wore, the way they walked and the way they talked, the manner in which they treated death and greeted the newborn. During this session, the Legislature will be invited to discuss a national cultural heritage policy for Bermuda. This policy will combine those strands that jointly speak of Bermuda's uniqueness and shared identity with those peoples from whom we are descended. One history, many cultures, a shared cultural identity. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the world's greatest powers find themselves unable to leverage their traditional tools of economic and military might against an invisible threat to the systems and institutions on which they depend. COVID-19 has unleashed a reckoning that has shredded the veneer of equality of opportunity that has long been professed by modern democratic societies. Governments the world over have been forced to confront the reality that rebuilding cannot be a one-dimensional return to what was. Bermuda is no exception. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in the midst of a public health crisis, affordable universal health care for all is an unquestionable priority. In collaboration with Bermuda First, the government will introduce a Bermuda health plan that will, through technology, maximise efficiencies via an integrated healthcare model. Public and private sectors will join to reduce Bermuda's healthcare spend and drive better healthcare outcomes. Focusing on prevention, as well as primary and community care, will significantly reduce the imbalanced reliance on expensive hospital care. Bermudians pay too much for healthcare, and so we must seize this unique opportunity to enact systemic reform that will lead to reduced financial pressures on families and small businesses. To reduce costs to consumers, the government will mandate pharmacies to provide pricing information on the most commonly prescribed medications to establish a national drug formulary. This will permit maximum prices to be set for the most frequently prescribed medicines, reducing costs to patients and providing relief to those on fixed incomes. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda's young people must feel the investment of their homeland in their success. Guided by a goal of establishing multiple pathways to success for Bermudian students, the government will complete the transformation of the public school system, collaboratively designing an improved system for Bermuda. The redesigned system will benefit from reformed governance and greater accountability, with the creation of an authority to lead all aspects of performance management in public education. The government will provide a public school system that produces students equipped for vocational, academic or business careers of their choosing. Middle schools will be phased out, and Bermuda's public schools will revert to a two-tier system of primary schools followed by signature schools at the secondary level. Critically, teachers will be supported throughout the redesign process and beyond to ensure that they too are equipped to deliver on the demands of modern instruction. In this session, the government will advance a bill to give effect to the necessary changes to the public school system, enshrining in law the importance of this work to the future of Bermuda. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda's future must be built by those to whom it most belongs. The government believes that we must respect and value young people's contributions to society, and in so doing will develop a national youth policy to foster direct engagement of our youth in the creation of government policy. Programmes that serve this population will be reviewed for effective delivery and revised as necessary to inspire a generation of informed and independent thinkers. The investment in the success of young people will extend to those most in need of support. To fill the void that exists when young people age out of government care, the government will establish independent living coordinators who will devise individual plans for our young people coming out of care to provide affordable housing options, post-secondary education and career advice, as well as access to physical and mental health care. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, fulfilling the moral imperatives of these times will be realised by fiscal management that sustains the most vulnerable and creates the foundation to deliver the transformed society the government has promised. During this session, the Legislature will be invited to consider bills to create the Bermuda National Digital Bank, to reform banking laws and regulations, and to establish a Bermuda base interest rate. Shares in the Bermuda National Digital Bank will be available for Bermudian ownership, providing an opportunity for a new generation of investors to create lasting wealth by supporting the next wave of financial services, connecting Bermudians to the global world of digital payments. The reform of banking laws will increase competition in this sector, introduce new classes of banks to Bermuda to boost the economy, and harmonise Bermuda base rate charged by local banks, while working with these banks to reduce the interest rates on mortgages. To assist families in their home ownership aspirations, the government will introduce further pension reform to allow for the use of a portion of pension account balances to fund a down payment on the purchase of a home for first-time home buyers. A new generation of Bermudian owners will be urged to use this opportunity to transform the city of Hamilton into a living city again. Concurrently, these new owners and existing mortgage holders will be protected by a bill to mandate enhanced consumer protections for loans and mortgages. Thank you. During this session, the House of Assembly will be invited to approve additional capital development spending to stimulate Bermuda's economy. Capital projects will be advanced to keep people employed while refreshing our infrastructure. A revised capital development plan will be produced, setting out targeted project expenditure to keep Bermudians working while the global economy recovers from the economic shock of the coronavirus pandemic. The uncertainty of these times cannot be allowed to deter the efforts to promote diversification of this economy. Bermuda's effective management of the coronavirus and the rigorous testing regime at our borders has provided an avenue of growth which the government will continue to exploit. During this session, the government will reform laws and policies that will aid in developing an ecosystem so that technology companies can base their operations in Bermuda. These new residents will enable the evolution of a technology community in Bermuda to complement the legacy industries that provide the mainstay of the island's employment and revenue. Unused and underused sites in the city of Hamilton will be permitted to develop co-working spaces in which local and global entrepreneurs can live, work and play together while building the future. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly. To further the healing of the country's historic divisions bred from politically motivated immigration policies of years past, the Government will continue to protect the rights of Bermudians while reforming policies to increase the residential population to support economic growth. During this session, the Legislature will be invited to support revisions to the long-term residential certificate policy to require those granted the right to live in Bermuda to make economic investments in the island or to invest in the new Bermuda Trust Fund, which will be set up to benefit those who have not had the benefit of historic inherited wealth. Many of the challenges that are the most important to Bermudians, such as the cost of living, job creation and economic growth, can be advanced by economic policies linked to progressive immigration reform. Therefore, the Legislature will be invited to consider revisions to the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act that will advance comprehensive immigration reform by providing a framework for persons to obtain permanent residency in Bermuda. A bill to modernise Bermuda's intellectual property regime will be introduced. This bill will protect the rights of local innovators and add to the arsenal of legislative underpinning required to promote the development of this potentially lucrative area of economic diversification. Similarly, the subsea cable fees regime will be completed and will position Bermuda to reap the benefits of the need for global connectivity and data protection in an increasingly online world. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in its fifth and most recent report, the Fiscal Responsibility Panel noted, without addressing the unbalanced focus on taxing wage incomes rather than capital incomes, Bermuda will be shackled in its ability to increase employment, particularly over a medium to longer term characterised by an ageing and shrinking population. The panel further stated, it is essential to achieve greater equity by reducing taxes for those at the bottom of the pyramid, while extending taxes to those with significant capital income or assets. It would be both realistic and sensible to set this as the long-term objective. During this session, the Government will lay the foundation for the necessary changes to our system of taxation, which currently exacerbates economic inequality while stifling much-needed economic growth. The inequity laid bare by the pandemic's impact cannot be an accepted feature of the new economy. Therefore, the Tax Reform Commission will be invited to update its recommendations made in 2018 in light of the new economic realities created by the pandemic. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda's business maturity exists in spite of its constitutional adolescence. Bermuda's economic fortunes depend now more than ever on the ability to be nimble and free to seize international opportunities unencumbered. Having been invited by Her Majesty's Government to identify areas for constitutional reform, the Government's recommendations for necessary changes will focus on achieving a revised constitutional model that provides the Government with the flexibility needed to best advance Bermuda's economic growth. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, keyboards and phones have become weaponised, and a new method of assault is occasioned by the misuse of the internet and the 21st century's advanced connectivity. The Government will introduce a bill to address revenge porn and online assaults, ensuring that the criminal justice system expands its reach to meet such cyber offences and to protect the victims of these modern assaults. The Government will establish the Office of the Public Guardian to provide independent services and support for seniors, children and other vulnerable persons in circumstances where they are unable to make decisions for themselves in the management of their health, financial or legal affairs. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in his third lecture entitled Justice Without Bondage, from the series The New Liberty, Survival and Justice in a Changing World, Ralph Dahrendorf said, "Equality provides the floor of the mansion in which liberty flourishes. The new liberty will not be won unless every citizen is given access to the varied universe of life chances in a complex society. The new liberty means that equality is there for people to be different and not for the differences of people to be levelled and abolished. To enshrine the rights of differently abled persons, the government will seek the extension to Bermuda of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, reaffirming that all persons, irrespective of their type of disability, must enjoy fundamental human rights and freedoms. The seed of new liberty will be planted in the island's vulnerable children. The outdated Childcare Placement Board will be replaced by a Children's Commission, whose remit will be to advocate for the children in care, promoting best practice policy, programmes and service responses to meet their needs. Ageing with dignity and supporting families who devote themselves to caring for the senior loved ones is a community effort. All data demonstrate a demographic trend towards living longer and increasing numbers of citizens proudly wearing the title senior. Therefore, the government will develop and invite the Legislature to consider a national senior strategy with particular emphasis on dementia care and a prevention plan for seniors' abuse. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the intricate story of Bermuda started on the shores of an East End landfall, and from that unintended beginning, the island's historical anchor has been St. George's. Rebuilding Bermuda must encompass the renewal of the East End. In this session, the Legislature will take under consideration a bill to grant a leasehold interest in the St. George's Club to the developers of the St. Regis Hotel and a bill to support the construction of a marina in the town of St. George. Additionally, municipal reform for the corporations of Hamilton and St. George will be advanced in this session. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, today's economic and social complexities challenge law enforcement to sensitively and effectively police communities. A previously unfulfilled undertaking of the government will be revisited to promote the very policing the community supports. During this session, a bill to create a police authority will be introduced to facilitate an open and collaborative forum to support the Bermuda Police Service and the communities they serve. A national crime prevention plan will focus on prevention, rehabilitation and reintegration. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the government's immediate action to supplement the wages of those whose employment addressed a need in the community that added urgency to the completion of the work to implement minimum and living wages. In this session, the Legislature will take under consideration the final aspects of the wage reform in support of Bermuda's workers. The government firmly believes that it has an enduring responsibility to provide the hand up for those whose circumstances do not permit them to meet the basic necessities of life in this society. In this session, the Legislature will be invited to take under consideration reform to the system of financial assistance that will better place recipients on a pathway to employment, allowing them to save and build their assets like most working people. The reforms will include the ability of recipients to retain 50% of child support to defray child-related expenses, and will also permit recipients to receive other assistance up to $2,500 for household expenses, both without penalty. The precarious position of businesses and the potential for additional economic contraction have demonstrated a clear need to provide unemployment insurance and strengthen the ability of employers to meet their statutory obligations in the event of redundancy of employees. As part of the tripartite dialogue series initiated by the Ministry of Labour, these issues will be the subject of that collaborative process to promote a secure environment in which employers and employees can meet their obligations. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, following our successful reintroduction of scheduled flights and the resumption of our tourism industry in a limited fashion, opportunities exist to enhance the attendant transport framework that is relied upon more and more to move locals and guests alike. The volume of statutory provisions regulating traffic and licensed vehicles are daunting and often too restrictive in an area where growth and change are necessary to keep up with changing technology. Therefore, in this session, the Legislature will take under consideration a bill to harmonise the licence fees for public service vehicles and to modernise various aspects of the Motor Car Act 1951. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, the Government has previously recorded its desire to see a suitable code of conduct for parliamentarians. This call is renewed as trying times in our communities will yield robust debate among legislators. A code setting out a standard of conduct that reflects the awesome nature of the trust placed in those who represent the people would be a fitting prelude for those next 400 years. The ethos of that code would do well to echo the sentiments of Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet and scholar, who observed, "Raise your words, not voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder." Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in addition to the bills mentioned earlier, the Legislature will be invited to consider the following bills in this session: Banks and Deposit Companies Amendment Act, Family Office Act, Education Amendment Act, Pharmacy and Poisons Amendment Act, Criminal Code Amendment Act, Fire Safety Amendment Act, Cannabis Licensing and Regulations Act, Digital Asset Business Amendment Act, Municipalities Amendment Act. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda's successful response to the pandemic has proven our ability to bridge racial, social, economic, and cultural divides. Ideology was mostly set aside, and we united to chart a course through the unknown. In this year of 2020, we have known curfews and shelter in place, alphabetized shopping and remote working. Our interactions personally and socially have drastically altered through necessary physical distancing. A previous legislature contemplated making the wearing of masks and face coverings illegal. But today, the world's deliberative bodies are leaning towards making them mandatory. Such is the upending nature of life in this third decade of the 21st century. Having secured a convincing mandate from the people of Bermuda, the government is determined to drive a movement of change for the island. In quiet moments, we may yearn for a return to the normal. But in that normal, too many Bermudians lacked opportunity. Too many Bermudians lack the chance to build for their families that which some inherited as a matter of right. And too many Bermudians were denied the tools to break a cycle of multi-generational trauma and violence. To that normal, we will not return. There will be a time when COVID-19 is not the sole determinant of how we live. We will unite in full worship again. We will assemble as friends and family in fellowship again. We will renew historic sporting rivalries, and cup match will again be our summer highlight. But in the meantime, we must continue to shield the vulnerable and help those who need it most. Traditionally, the Governor is permitted to add some words of his own, and I do so on this occasion, mindful of the fact that this is my last speech from the throne, and that when the Legislature next convenes in this fashion, a woman will deliver the address from this historic seat. I have much to do in my remaining weeks in office, but I will depart Bermuda confident that this island will find a way through the future challenges it will face as it has managed and overcome current and past challenges. That is partly due to our strong institutions, including this elected assembly, our government, and our independent judiciary, operating with a clear separation of powers, helping to protect individual human rights and enshrining the rule of law. Above all, however, it is due to the inventiveness, commitment, and determination of the people of these islands in all their diversity, which we have seen come to the fore this year to perhaps a greater extent than in any period since World War II. I pay deep tribute to our medical and health staff, our emergency services, and all those who have helped to keep Bermuda safe in the past year. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, I declare this session open, and may God guide you in your deliberations.
Yes, first 6 bars of the national anthem to be played as the governor departs.
Royal Bermuda Regiment, we, the Mayor and the councilors of the town of St. George, confer upon the Royal Bermuda Regiment freedom of entry of the town of St. George with the rights and associated privilege to march through the town, bayonets fixed, colors flying, and band playing. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Could you check it for me? Is it on?
The band, the regiment, the Royal Bermuda Regiment, and the Royal Bermuda Regiment Band will now march on. They have been given the rights by His Worship Mayor George Dowling III.
Yes,
to
they've been
march
given
and
the
process around the march.
freedom of the town.
Members of Parliament will now retire to St. Peter's Church, and members of the Senate will retire to St. Peter's Church
St.
Hall.
Peter's Church Hall. To continue the business of the day. The band is playing so smartly.
Once again, CITV has been delighted to bring you this coverage. And as we said, the pageantry of the convening of Parliament on this, the 400th, marking the 400th anniversary of the convening of the Assembly. We have been delighted to be a part.
You will see the recession. Yeah.
You guys gonna talk?
Yeah.
Okay, start clattering.
So, of course, we've had the Royal Bermuda Band, Royal Bermuda Regiment Band, the Royal Bermuda Regiment, and now the members are retiring to their respective chambers. The members of the House of Assembly will retire to St. Peter's Chapel, Her Majesty's Chapel, St. Peter's Church. How are you? Yep.
We were just waving to some of the
MPs
members and the MPs as they
the
leave.
senators will be leaving next, and they will retire to St. Peter's Church Hall, Her Majesty's Chapel, St. Peter's Church Hall. And it has been a delightful day, well organized.
Well organized.
Congratulations to the committee and those ceremonial committee members that organized the event. This will also be a unique day as well because they'll go back and the youth parliamentarians, Mackenzie Cole Tuckett and the
Young man, Mr. Douglas.
I don't want to say his name wrong, but they will pose questions.
Yes.
They get to pose questions to the premier. That will take place, and you will be able to see it live on CITV. The cameras have been allowed into St. Peter's Chapel, into St. Peter's Church. So if you will stay with us, allow the members to get back up the hill. It's literally almost up the hill.
It is, just up the hill, round the corner and up the hill.
Yeah. And they will go back and they will do business of the day.
Yes.
We really encourage you to stay with us as long as you can. Stay with us.
Absolutely.
As part of this thing. It continues on
yes.
at the House of Assembly, and the members of Parliament will, of course, be able to carry on some of the business of the youth parliamentarians.
Yes.
It was a shorter speech for the throne. Governor John Rankin's the last one, and as he made mention, the next one will be presented
by the
new governor. And
I thought the speech to the throne, I had 3 words to summarize. I thought it was aspirational, I thought it was sensitive to the people's needs, and I also thought it was progressive. They talked about a digital bank, for example. They talked about making changes to code of conduct in Parliament.
Lots of legislation. There's going to be a busy legislative session. We thank you on behalf of CITV. We thank you for joining us. We invite you to stay with us. The coverage will continue.
There'll be a 20-minute break.
A short break. And you'll be right back, and we'll be inside of the chapel, and you'll get to see The youth parliamentarians ask questions and everything going on inside of St. Peter's Church. Well done to the team of CITV. Thank you,
Yes.
Heather Whalen.
Thank you,
It's
Tina.
always
It's been a
joy to
pleasure
work
working with you.
Yeah,
I think CITV did an excellent job.
right. And we want
Excellent
to
job.
thank everyone for joining us today as we brought you the coverage of the convening of the legislature 2020. Have a wonderful day and stay with us for more coverage.
Definitely. Here in the lovely town of the historic St. George's.